Hello and welcome to Spotlight Podcast. Tonight we are filming from our small studio in Sarajevo. I have a special guest tonight. Tonight with us are Nicholas and Priya from Johns Hopkins University, Bologna campus. Guys, welcome to the Spotlight Podcast.
Thanks very much.
And thanks for having us.
Please tell me, how do you feel in Sarajevo so far?
Sarajevo has been lovely. We're here as part of a study trip that the university and its affiliated think tank put on each year. And this is actually the first time that the trip has been happening since 2020. So it's a real pleasure to be here and a unique privilege that I wouldn't be able to have had otherwise in most other circumstances.
So the pause was because of the COVID-19 pandemic, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because when I did my research, I saw that since 2013, I think, every year you guys send a delegation to Sarajevo and visit various places.
Yes, actually the first year that this trip ran was 2001. So
wow.
Very recent after the wars concluded.
So basically 22 years of anniversary of this bilateral relations.
Exactly.
Nice, nice. Can you tell me your impressions in general about the Sarajevo so far?
It has really been a very surprising city in the most positive ways. I think I can speak for our entire group and say that it's been a very welcoming and warm city, even as it's been snowing almost every day we've been here, and the weather's obviously been cold, but such is a Balkan January.
Yeah.
But everyone from locals on the street to folks working in shops and restaurants to our guides and drivers have really been wonderful, and I think it's been a very unique experience for all of us.
Very nice. Priya, what about you? Sorry, Nicholas.
No, please.
It's kind of this kind of form, podcast, but I admit I'm doing it the first time with the two guests.
No, it's great. Sarajevo is very different from any place that I've traveled to, and I have been able to travel to quite a few places. And what strikes me about Sarajevo is walking around. I mean, I do think that it's a very pretty city, and then also, you're walking around and you see a mosque, and then you see a synagogue, and then you see a church, and it's really multicultural. And that's something that, you don't get in a lot of Western European cities, and so that's something that I think is very special about Sarajevo, and it's just been really interesting to be here and learn about the history of the city and what people have survived.
And we are talking about proximity in diameter less than 1 kilometer. So the mosque and the church.
Right. I mean, almost right next to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so many across the city.
And people are living in a harmony.
Mm-hmm. And just to see, historical sites of such great significance, to see where Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, and to think that this is the spot of so many significant historical events. It just really brings you into the moment in a way that some other cities just don't quite have that same impact.
Exactly. Can you tell me so far what are the official institutions that you had the pleasure to visit, and what are your impressions?
Yes, you caught us at a great time because we have concluded our entire itinerary, a very busy itinerary of the last few days. So we actually started the trip with a new addition to the trip. We received an informal briefing from a former advisor to one of the previous members of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I think that was a really useful and helpful experience, painting a very, modern picture of the political situation in the country and the governmental situation and challenges that Bosnian society and government faces today. Something that articles and historical readings and other resources might not really be able to be as helpful about illustrating.
So what is your personal impression about these things, Nicholas, at the moment that you hear?
I've been following Bosnian and Balkan politics and government and elections for a little bit longer than I think most of the others on the trip. So it's a little less surprising to me, but it was still for me very helpful to hear.
You have that insight.
Exactly, to have that insight from someone who's worked within the system, worked day to day facing these challenges as part of his job. and is able to speak freely about them, which is, I think, a very useful and helpful opportunity for us.
Priya, you come from Connecticut.
Yes.
Can you tell me what was your previous knowledge about the region? 6 former states of former Yugoslav Republic, and Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina in particular?
It was relatively little. Some academic studies on the subject. I've done, some personal reading. One book stands out in particular. Actually, 2 books. One from Samantha Powers, who's a U.S. diplomat and current ambassador to the UN. She was a journalist during the war in Sarajevo, and so she wrote a lot about her experiences here. So I'd read that, and then I'd read another book from a wartime correspondent. But otherwise, my experience was more than a basic knowledge, but not much more than that. I didn't really have an understanding of the political system until we got here, and Nick had given us a small briefing before we came. But
exactly.
It's really hard to get into the specific details and just the complexity of the issue. And so that's something that these meetings have also really illustrated, is just how complex the political situation is here, but it's also really, really interesting.
Yeah, I do feel that complex is the right word to describe the whole situation in the Western Balkans at the moment. And in general, what is the impression that you will take back home about the current situation here and the overall picture that you kind of have at the moment? Maybe Nicholas can jump in and help a little bit.
Sure.
While you think.
What I never could have predicted or prepared for, what we received, what we learned from the different meetings. So to answer your original question, our first meeting on Monday, this past Monday, was with the director of the Directorate for European Integration for the Bosnian Council of Ministers. So this is a man who's really the top civil servant for the Bosnian government, who's working and advising the government on steps that are needed to be taken towards European integration, which is a very timely subject and a very notable subject right now, as Bosnia received candidate status for the EU just last year. And from that meeting, where there was a very positive outlook for the next steps Bosnia can take in its path towards European integration, to meeting with journalists from Al Jazeera Balkans in the afternoon, who was able to kind of give some insight on coverage of this country and really the much bigger challenges that this country truly faces in that path towards European integration. And really just that contrast, just that first day, I think was very telling to see that even, there are still many different ways to interpret different steps that have been taken on this path, and different actions taken by politicians and by civic society activists and everywhere else. How many different paths and different opinions can still emerge through that.
Definitely. Priya, Nicholas mentioned one visit. What was the other visit that you can recall? I think maybe, I'm not sure with you guys or with the previous delegation, that a regular agenda is a visit to the local UN office and the representatives there. Did you have the opportunity to see these kind of people there today?
We
or
did.
These days?
So yesterday we had 5 meetings yesterday. Had first we met with the OSCE, and then we met with the World Bank. After that we met with the UNDP, and then we met with the EU. And after that, it was the U.S. Embassy. And so, that really speaks to right. A huge array of, first, the different kinds of work that these organizations are doing. The OSCE is, working more so on electoral integrity but human rights and a whole wider range of issues. And then, to the U.S. Embassy, which is working on more so kind of the political situation, and the World Bank, which is kind of working on financing different infrastructure projects. And so we really we got insight into all of that. Today we met with the women of Srebrenica. We took a trip by bus over to Srebrenica, and for me, that was, I think for everyone, that was a really, really impactful visit. And I think the biggest there are a lot of takeaways here, but for me, the biggest takeaway was the resilience of people to rebuild life and to keep going. And that was something that really struck me meeting with the women today was their resilience and their friendship and their deep ties that they've made with one another and their commitment to their home.
Commemoration that is happening every year. It's it's been a heartbreaking event for a lot of officials in the region, and it's an opportunity for all of them to gather and to speak with each other again and to recall some of the most important decisions that were made, and basically to kind of recall how we end up in the situation with the war and everything. So I'm very glad that you guys had this opportunity to have this visit, and I hope that further generations will also from your school have the same opportunity as you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of my goals in planning this trip this year, and it was not a trip I expected to be planning. I was looped in on, I knew about this trip taking place generally when I was considering attending Johns Hopkins SAIS, but only after I started classes back in the fall was the opportunity offered to me to be the coordinator of this year's trip. I really didn't know what it would entail. What I came to discover was after 3 years of the trip being on hiatus, there were quite a few gaps to fill in terms of different organizations to reach out to, different contacts, different scheduling.
The situation has changed.
Exactly.
Also.
The situation has changed politically in the country over 3 years, quite drastically in certain aspects. So I had to make a lot of decisions in planning this trip to make sure that the attendees of the trip, myself included, would get a really as accurate picture as possible of the country in every aspect. And my goal with future years is that hopefully between all the work done in previous years that I was able to use for this year's planning, as well as my planning of this year, future years are going to be set up for success in coming back here, being encouraged to come back here, because I think this trip has been immensely rewarding, both personally as well as professionally, and also academically. And I think there are really few better ways to learn about a situation, about a country, about different issues of development, democratization, economic empowerment, women's rights, etc., than going there, meeting with the stakeholders, meeting with the leaders working on all of these issues. And for that, I think it's been a very positive trip.
No, absolutely. And I think that we, when you're coming on a trip like this, especially for people that haven't visited the region before, which most of us hadn't, you have a great responsibility to come in and learn as much as you can and try not to, impose your own opinions on the situation, particularly a situation that's so sensitive. And so we were able, just with the breadth of organizations that Nick was able to organize, we were able to get a really, really good understanding of the situation on the ground, I think, to the best extent that we can, because, we're only here for a few days. There's, we're not even close to knowing as much as we can or should about the country, but it was just really interesting too. And I think there was one theme that emerged, or a couple of themes that emerged from our visits to all the organizations, but particularly with the larger international organizations. They found that their most effective work was done with local actors, was done with not necessarily politicians or actors at the national level, but at the state and the municipal levels. And they found that people were really willing to work together and bridge those divides to make the situation better for their communities. And that was something that every single organization said, that we've tried to localize these projects as much as we can, because that's been the most effective.
That was basically the point that I was trying to make in my head while Nicholas was talking, to ask you about the civic sector and the NGO sector as well. What do you think in particular? Apart from all other stakeholders that are involved in the system, how crucial is the role of the the NGOs and civil society?
I think one of my biggest takeaways from this entire trip, both through meeting with local actors, meeting with international organizations, meeting with governments and multilateral institutions, is that the local voice is always going to be the most important one in the room. Based on whatever different circumstances, it might not be the most heard voice in the room. And I think that's often to the organization's disadvantage. Because I think one thing a number of us noticed going to meeting after meeting was that the local staff that was assisting in the meetings, when they were able to pipe in about an issue that they were working on or an issue that they brought up to this larger organization they're working for, because they know the people, they know the culture, they know the history better than any other international institution or actor could ever. That's that voice and those groups and those people working on those issues, bringing those up, both through their own organizations, but also through these larger stakeholders in the region. That's going to be crucial for any successes this country or any country in the region has in the coming years.
I think part of the reason why this country managed to develop after this terrible war was exactly the civic sector, and the fact that myself, I had the opportunity to host around 10 people up to now in our Spotlight podcast, and every single one of these were engaged in volunteering, various kinds, from let's say preparing packages for the kids and orphan kids, packages for the New Year's Eve and the Christmas, up to the fact that they had prepared various educational opportunities for them, both online and in person, where they organize Zoom meetings and various courses for English language, for German language, for ICT sectors. So I think the civil society in Bosnia is second to none in the region, and if you agree with me, this is maybe one of the most important reasons why, as I said, this country managed to rebuild. And
I think it goes hand in hand, and you mentioned it just in that bit about the need for improvement of the education system in this country. And I think one thing that we all remarked on after meeting was education was a common theme, the need for education system reform and improvement and advancement in this country. The divisions that exist in the education system are crippling to both the quality of education students are receiving, but also to the future health of the education system overall. I mean, I think one issue that many can relate to, even from the US, is education systems are quick to go into a death spiral when there's a lack of quality and there's a lack of funding.
Sure.
And obviously to different extents. I don't mean to compare the two. But when you have two schools under one roof, that's a very common issue in the Federation here. As well as the second entity, Republika Srpska, having its entire own school system. But all three systems having their own curriculum, own teachers, own administrators, own board of supervisors, or school board in general. And that's very damaging to children. And when the civil society is working towards building a brighter future for this country, one that people value each other's differences and respect each other's differences, a difference of ethnicity, religion, identity, having a system that categorizes people in the way that it currently does in many cases is immensely damaging to that future. But I was very impressed by so many different organizations work in this sector, in this field, in trying to bridge those gaps and close those divides so that students now have the opportunity to grow up in a society, or grow up in at least an education system that values each of them individually and equally, regardless of their background or who their parents are or where they live.
To realize that the kids, you know, the kids that they live down the street from, or the kids that they go to school at a different time from, just because of, you know, their ethnic differences, or really just kids just like them. And that was a really fundamental theme in all of our meetings, was that it starts with kids and with their education, and then that it's just so critically important.
Throughout the elementary, middle, high school level up to undergrad and postgrad studies.
Yep.
Absolutely. And a statement we heard multiple times over the last few days was that some of the most radicalized citizens in this country, and that was the term that was used, not one that I'm picking up, were the youngest. And it's the generation that grew up after the war, so they did not see the pain and destruction that those divisions caused in the past. But also children that have grown up in a system that is categorizing them, that they do not know that there is a better way forward, that does not put them into specific groups and identities and divide society based on those differences. And you know, my perception from the past few days has been that leads to just a generation of people, a generation of citizens that do think that their neighbor that goes to a different religious service is worse than them, or somehow does not belong in their neighborhood or in their town.
It's a reciprocal division that is something that just keeps, you know, something that's very difficult to overcome and just continues to be perpetuated otherwise. And yeah, I mean, kind of parallel to that is that a lot of young people are leaving the country because they feel that there is a lack of opportunity here, and I think part of that is also due to the education system, and then also just the lack of investment in you know, business and enterprise. And education for so many is a way up and a way out, and that's across the world. That's something that's universal, is that education is, you know, it should be something that every single kid should get. That's, you know, it's supposed to be the place where you can go to school and get, you know, have classes where you're taught the truth, and you're taught, you know, it's I don't
not the reason why you're thinking to leave.
Right.
Do you think that this issue is particularly addressed properly, let's say, in a sense that if the education is a burning issue, and if they feel that they're going to receive a better education elsewhere, do you think that the countries in the region, and Bosnia in particular, the federation, actually, I'm trying to put it in a way that authorities are addressing these issue properly. Do you feel this is the situation at the moment?
I think there are efforts that are taking place to address those issues. But unfortunately, as well-intentioned as they are and as important as they are, they're only going so far, because the people and the organizations and the entities that are recognizing those challenges and trying to fix them are doing it from the outside. There are multilateral organizations, international agencies, national governments, like the US perhaps, that are working towards addressing these issues.
And we are talking about systematic issues as well.
Right, it has to be an internal systemic change.
But that's the problem, is because...
The question would be, do they have in mind a particular comprehensive strategy to tackle?
Even if they did, I just don't think it would matter, because even if the OSCE or the EU or the US or anyone else had that comprehensive strategy, it still requires local buy-in. And there is a limited amount of local buy-in. You have a number of schools individually who have taken steps to improve their education system. But for truly national or even regional systemic change, it requires buy-in of politicians who right now under this system, under this political system, have no real incentive to want to break down those barriers and advance the quality of the schools that they govern.
Priya, do you have something to add?
I think I don't remember which organization it was, but one organization was talking about how there are so many incredible teachers and administrators. So again, it speaks to the importance of the individual at a local level making a difference. Teachers who are kind of, making sure that they teach the right history and making sure that they teach the truth and making sure that they're treating all of their students the same. And there are so many teachers doing that. And then, there are these organizations that are trying to kind of advance these changes. One of the, I was thinking more at the national level, I mean, this is a prerogative of integration for Bosnia and Herzegovina into the European Union. Education is one of the priorities.
Top priorities,
yes. And so there are certain standards that they do have to meet before integration. And so there is, I think, some political push for that. But again, I mean, it's just a really systemic issue that's really hard to change. Yeah.
Okay, I kind of exhaust all the questions related to this first part of our episode. We will have a brief pause, and then we will have some more talk about some relaxing topics like studying in Bologna versus studying in DC, and everything else. So stay with us. We will come back after a very quick pause. Here we are again in our small studio in Sarajevo. I have Nicholas and Priya with me tonight, and I kind of jumped right into very serious topics, and I didn't even get to ask you guys about where are you from, and to give me a little background about your profile.
So I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania in Bucks County, which is just north of Philadelphia. I grew up in a town of about 8,000 people. So definitely not the typical upbringing location-wise for someone pursuing a career in international relations. Or maybe it is, but definitely not a diverse or multicultural or a lot of the different themes or parts of a society that maybe incline people to get into this field of work. But a number of different opportunities led me to move to Washington, D.C. for my undergraduate degree at American University, where I studied government and security, and then I worked in the area for a few years, and that brings me to Bologna, where I am now.
Oh, nice. So do I realize it correctly? You graduated from the American University,
yes,
and now you are postgrad studies in Bologna.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, nice.
So I am in the Master's in International Relations program, which is 1 year in Bologna and 1 year in DC.
In DC.
Yes.
Okay. So it's a subsequent year. You will travel to DC. You'll travel back home.
Precisely.
Okay. Okay. Priya, what about you?
So I was born and raised in central Connecticut, in a very small town, not quite as small as Nick's, but about 16,000. So
how far from Hartford, Connecticut?
About 30-minute drive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I didn't go into Hartford much as a kid, to be honest. And there's not much to do in my town, so I actually don't know what I did. But I ended up going to school about an hour away at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. It's an all-women's college in this very picturesque, New England town.
Beautiful.
Surrounded by, it's called the Pioneer Valley and the mountains, the Berkshires. And I studied government, and I had the opportunity to travel to several different countries when I was there, thanks to Smith's funding. I hadn't really traveled at all growing up. And so that was what really got me interested in international affairs. When I graduated, I actually moved directly to Geneva, Switzerland, and I got my first master's degree at the Graduate Institute in Geneva. It was a general degree in international affairs and global security. And I was there for 2.5 years. Most of it was under COVID, so it was a lot of remote classes. But it was still, I mean, it was fine. And then I worked in Brussels for 6 years before coming here to Bologna. And I'm in the 1-year Masters of European Public Policy program.
You guys having impressive resumes. I envy you guys.
We've been trained to give our little elevator pitch in everyday conversation.
I'm like, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this.
Never intentional, but it comes out that way sometimes.
I'm helping a lot of kids to pass the TOEFL exam, and one of the 4 speaking exercises is a 45-second one.
Yep.
And is basically similar to elevator pitch. But when I spoke to my American friends, you know, I kind of made the comparison. They said, Janko, we have very fast elevators, so make it quick, under 25 seconds. Okay, so can you guys tell me a little bit about your experience in Italy so far?
It's been unlike anywhere I've ever been, and unlike anything I've ever did or done, I should say. And I think most there would agree in one way or another. I had lived abroad previously. One of the semesters in my undergraduate program I spent in Dublin, Ireland. So that was my first flirtation with living abroad, per se, but in a much less risky environment in terms of cultural adaptation. Language culture. I mean, it's English speaking. It's an hour closer to the East Coast where my family lives. It's familiar in certain ways. So Italy was really the next step. But after 7 years of living in DC, and a city I'm very fond of, to be very honest, seeing the opportunity to change things up a little bit, even just for a year, really appealed to me. Getting the same quality of education as I could get in DC, but in a different location, in a new location. My interest has been Eastern Europe and the Western Balkans for quite a while, so this was a great opportunity to just be physically closer to it. It brought us here to Sarajevo. Bologna is such a lovely international and student city. University of Bologna has roughly 90,000 students. It's one of the biggest institutions for higher education, I think.
And the oldest in Europe.
Yes, and the oldest in Europe. And there are only about 200 of us at Johns Hopkins SAIS in Bologna, but we're all international relations oriented in one program or another. So it's been really great, and I think that community that's built with some type of common interest between us all has really made it such an enjoyable experience, academically, personally, professionally, and an experience I'm very glad I've done, despite only being about halfway through it.
Priya, can you draw a small parallel in relation to educational systems in the US and in Italy? At least on a level of professor, staff, and curriculum. Can you tell me, do you have a lot of international professors, or basically they're most from Italy?
We do have quite a few international professors. I think they're still mostly European. We have quite a few professors from the UK, I think, actually, and some Italian professors. So the thing is that the SAIS Bologna campus is, because it is just an offshoot of the DC campus.
Sure.
Typically, I think the classes are relatively similar to what you might be learning at the DC campus, except that you are getting this European perspective, and that's what I think is really unique and kind of valuable about it. So not only are you having professors that are, from other places other than just the DC metro area, but you're also getting to study and learn in one of the oldest university cities in Europe, and in a center of art and culture. And that's what I was going to say was just so great about being in Bologna, is that, you go to class and you spend a good amount of time at school and you study a lot, but let's be honest, part of the great thing about going to school in Bologna is that you also get to take a 30-minute train ride to Florence, and you can go to all the different museums there, or you can take an hour-and-a-half train to Venice, and there are so many different opportunities.
Did you take advantage of all these things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I plan to more in the spring. But definitely have been able to go to Florence. I've gone to Rome, Milan. I'd like to go to some of the more small towns, the places that you probably wouldn't go to if you were just coming on vacation because you only want to hit the big cities. So I'd really like to go to some of the small towns near Bologna.
South Italy.
Yeah. Yep.
Nicholas, can you tell me more about your future agenda in relation to the whole program? Do you know what is coming for you guys?
That's the big question. So what I'm excited about personally, my year in DC that's coming up, it will be the first year that the new SAIS campus in DC is opening. They're moving from 60-plus-year-old academic buildings in one part of DC to what used to be called the Museum. It was this beautiful, large glass building equidistant between the White House and the Capitol building downtown.
It's beautiful.
And they're turning it into where all the classrooms and SAIS community will be. And I'm really looking forward to continuing my pursuit of learning more about these different issues of what I'm interested in Eastern Europe and Western Balkans, democratization, economic empowerment, a lot of the issues related to this region. But really aside from that, especially while I still have a few months left in Europe, being able to explore those issues from the European perspective and how they relate to this region that I have easier access to.
Yep.
It's not an opportunity most get to have that you can, on a long weekend, visit somewhere like Romania or Moldova or Bulgaria, countries that are easy to get to logistically from Europe, but next to impossible to for a short amount of time from the U.S. And aside from that being just a fun personal experience for me, I like to use these as opportunities to learn more about their history, their culture, their government. I'm an elections nerd. I enjoy following all the politics and happenings of different systems and governments and campaigns in different countries. And getting to experience these different issues in different places firsthand has really been a nice treat for me.
Definitely, you can encounter a lot of elections in Balkan Peninsula.
There's always something happening.
There's always something, cannot, get enough of elections in all the countries, former 6 member states. Priya, can you tell me more about your plans? What are you looking at? How this whole Europe map looks for you now?
Yeah. So I am, because I'm only here for a year, I am now going to be looking for a job. So wish me luck. But I'm very open to what I could go do. I'm thinking that I might actually go back to Washington, D.C. and try to work there for a few years. I'm really interested. I mean, one of the great things about SAIS, and this was not something that I got in my previous program, is one that the opportunities for networking with alumni that are really stationed all over the world and all over Europe, and they're doing just really, really interesting things. And, the career services that we've got at SAIS and that kind of thing. So I have learned a lot more about strategic advisory firms that I didn't really know much about. And so now I'm starting to consider that as a career. I think in the long term, I'm hoping to join the U.S. State Department, but we'll see. I mean, I could end up anywhere. But it's been really, really helpful to see where different alumni have ended up, and they're doing all kinds of interesting things around Europe. Yeah.
Okay, so after Geneva and after Italy, you're thinking of going back home and applying for some opportunities in DC.
I've been away for a while. It might be nice to go home.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And then come back to Europe again.
Exactly.
A vicious loop.
It's my ideal scenario right now in a future world where I get to just arbitrarily choose my work setup and work location, splitting time maybe equally between the Washington area and Europe. Of course,
I'll tell you, I had around 30 guests so far, and most of them were Chevening alumni, Fulbright alumni, and I realized that for them the most beautiful and desirable combo was okay, I will study for a year and then I work for 3 years. So 3 years of work, 1 year of study, 2 years of work, 1 year of study, and preferably somewhere outside the borders of their home country. So I think you guys are also looking at this option as well.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. You know, it was hard for me to predict ending up in a master's program, especially in the timeline I did. A lot of very interesting and unique circumstances lead one to that point, I think. And it's not this standard, almost stereotypical path that people often envision taking towards a postgraduate degree. But, you know, I'm very thankful that life worked out in a way that brought me to this program and brought me just to the opportunity and the ability to learn more and take, you know, further my education in general. You know, it's not something that many get to do, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity, and I really hope to get a lot out of it. And part of that has been, you know, ensuring that I'm getting those unique, direct experiences to further my education. For example, this trip, I think, especially going back to Washington next year for the program, and then who knows beyond that for work. There's no guarantee that I'll constantly have the ability to get that hands-on experience and hands-on educational opportunity that can make me a better contributor to whatever organization or agency or company or NGO that I might be working at. So using this time now, I think, is crucial for a lot of us to be able to take these lessons that we've learned through this program, through these opportunities, and apply them in whatever future way we can.
Priya, what do you think about the opportunities for US students to come for at least a semester or maybe a whole year to study in Europe? I feel that a lot of students, including you guys, are considering this option. Basically, from the, I mean, tuition-wise, obviously we know that tuitions in the US are astronomical compared to these comparable options in Europe. So I feel that a lot of your compatriots are thinking about extending their studies in Europe.
Yep. I mean, there are so many ways, I think, now to design your academic career and align it to your interests. And I think COVID's made a lot of these opportunities actually more accessible in a way, because there are now ways to not only do remote internships, but also do remote degrees. But in terms of actually coming to Europe, I mean, there are lots of opportunities to spend a semester abroad. I mean, SAIS allows its students to go do semesters abroad at other schools. Somebody in our program is about to go spend the semester at Sciences Po in Paris. But they also accept students from other schools. So we have lots of students that are going to university in Germany who spent a semester at Bologna at SAIS. At the Graduate Institute where I was before this, there were, and that is because SAIS is still a US-based institution, so the tuition prices are quite high, even in Bologna. But something like the Graduate Institute had much more, had prices that were much more on the European level, much more affordable, and they had all kinds of opportunities for different study abroad semesters and that kind of thing. But I mean, SAIS also does, so not only the Sarajevo study trip, but we also have things like career treks. There are different kinds of study trips and not just semesters abroad, but all different kinds of things that you can do.
I felt that a lot of students from UX are considering Netherlands and Scandinavian countries in particular, Sweden and Finland. And also, as you said, Germany, Austria, and Italy. What's your feeling, Nicholas? Do you have some friends around?
It's funny, actually. Someone I remember from my first year at my undergrad program, after the first year, transferred to a German university because she found it to be, an equally high quality program, and cost her literally nothing in tuition for that. Unfortunately, I think right now there's still a stigma in the U.S. against foreign degrees. Study abroad for a semester is usually through your home institution, so I really wouldn't compare that.
Right.
But I think there's still a perception by many employers and even many academic programs in the U.S. that getting an entire degree at a European institution, a European university, or somewhere else in the world for that matter, is inherently worse somehow than getting one in the U.S.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
And maybe part of it is because it's just, the institutions aren't as well known. I mean, why would they be? It's not, these aren't destinations for thousands upon thousands of American students. But maybe, I don't know, maybe you can speak a little bit about, the Graduate Institute experience for yourself in Geneva, being an American in a, completely European, unaffiliated with a U.S. program.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's true, right? The Institute is completely, it's not affiliated with a U.S. program in any way. But the interesting thing is that the Institute actually had a 4+1 program with my undergraduate school and with several other U.S.-based universities. So you could get, your bachelor's and then go to the Institute for 1 year and a semester rather than the full 2 years. But there was a huge diversity, geographical diversity of students at the Institute, even more so than at SAIS, I think. SAIS, we tend to have mostly just Europeans and then Americans for the most part, but students at the Graduate Institute were from all over. I think that's partly because the Institute is known for being... It sets you up to work in a humanitarian setting or with an NGO or an international organization like the UN to work. Particularly, they specialize in development and humanitarian programs and that kind of thing. But I mean, in terms of, I've actually had employers. I think that you're right about the stigma of foreign degrees, but I've also had employers or people that I've interviewed with who have really valued my international experience, and so I think that's something for anybody, even if you're a student from Bosnia or you're a student from the U.S. or any kind of international experience that you can get. It shows that you're curious. It shows that you're interested in different places. It shows that you're adaptable. So I think that it is valued in a way, but it's true in the U.S. there is
still a long way to go. Okay, guys, I will try to wrap it up with some ordinary thing that we have in our podcast. Is basically all our guests are giving a final advice to our audience, and most of our audience comprises of young students who are considering various options to study abroad. So what would be your advice in general? If I could kindly ask you to give me your opinion.
Some of the best opportunities and best lessons I've taken away from any opportunity have been by getting outside my comfort zone, studying in Ireland for a semester. It's as mundane or maybe as easy as that sounds on paper. It's still a big transition for myself. Or going to Italy for a year. And I think my general advice would be find opportunities that take you outside that comfort zone. If you're contemplating, if you're committed to going abroad for a semester, for a year, for a whole program, that's fantastic. Find one that suits your interests, but also maybe has some new challenges that might be thrown your way. Because I think that's where the most growth comes personally, academically, personally, professionally. And those are going to be the experiences that are going to help you in life, for decades to come. Something that you cannot get at your home institution or your home country where you're comfortable, you're familiar, you're not challenged in a way that you are elsewhere. We're challenged just as we would be academically in the U.S. while being in Europe, but living in a place we don't speak the language, didn't speak the language coming in, needing to get around, get groceries, order at restaurants. These little things, I think, can be immensely useful in your entire life, and just that greater level of comfort and respect for other cultures and regions and countries. And there's an opportunity, I think, for if a European student is considering studying abroad, I would say consider coming to the U.S. or Canada or somewhere off the European continent, because I think that's going to be culturally just so different.
Intercultural experiences.
And exactly, I gained so much, including lifelong friends from my time living in Ireland and now in Italy, and I think that taking advantage of the opportunity to be outside of even just an Erasmus program for a European student, for example,
yeah.
I think can really go a long way. As beneficial as Erasmus is and a wonderful program as it is,
Sure.
I think there are many opportunities beyond that. And to think creatively about your own interests, about where you might find some exciting opportunity beyond the normal paths forward.
Right.
Nicholas, point well made. Thank you so much for the insight. Priya?
Yeah. So kind of bouncing off of Nick's, because you stole mine a little bit. But I would say that sometimes the most unexpected opportunities are the most valuable. Things that you might not think immediately align with your interests or what you care about. Even if they don't quite align, if you can take the opportunity, take it and go that place that you might not know much about, or you might not have thought, I was super interested in visiting there or working there or studying there. Even if you weren't, if you have the opportunity, it might be really worth it to take it. And then
even if you fail to transfer all the credits, even if you feel halfway down the road, maybe you're going to pivot in the future.
Right. I mean, the number of times that I've pivoted my interests, I mean, they've always stayed generally within international affairs, but I've pivoted my regional interests, I've pivoted my interests so many times, in part due to these unexpected opportunities that come up that I've taken and have paid off. And then in the same vein, I think when you're about to go study abroad, whether or not you're doing a full semester, you're doing a few weeks over winter break, the best thing to do is to learn as much as you can about the country and the culture and the language and the food and the restaurants and the coffee culture like here. And to read and learn as much as you can to prepare, because it really does make the experience itself so much more, it gives so much more depth to the experience. And I think it really just makes it a much more worthwhile experience when you're actually there. And yeah, those would be my pieces of advice.
Guys, thank you so much for this wonderful experience. As I mentioned previously, it was my first time hosting two guests.
Impeccable.
You helped me, throughout this process. And thank you so much, and I wish you a pleasant stay on Balkan Peninsula and safe travel home.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.